Hi there, and welcome to Majin Sweet's Dark Souls Let's Play. For this playthrough, I'm probably just going to play casually for the most part. I'm not going to do a crazy challenge run like I usually do. And the only real requirement I'm going to put on myself, if you can call it that, is just use a weapon I've never really played like through the whole game with before. Other than that, I'm going to try my best to explain a lot of the details of this game, a lot of the gameplay mechanics, show off a lot of cool tricks, and maybe even explain some of the more secretive lore stuff. So I'm gonna really try my best to give out a lot of information about the game, because the cool thing about the Souls games is there's so many little tiny things that can have a huge impact on the game, and players just don't know about it. And it makes it even more cool when you find out those things. So as the game progresses, I'll try to keep that in mind and explain things the best I can. Now, the first thing you'll probably notice is I have black fire bombs. One of the reasons I picked the thief is because you start with a master key, and so essentially you get a free gift, an extra one. Not to mention that thieves are probably the best character to do a dex character with, and those are my preferred. So why did I pick the black fire bombs? Well, it's because black fire bombs are effing amazing. They're really high damage, especially for an item that can be thrown very far range. And just to show it off, I'm going to kill the tutorial boss right now. And you can just see how effective they are. Now, a lot of people probably know this trick, and it's really not even worth wasting the black fire bombs, but I just do it for the fun of it. And that black fire bomb went completely over his head and hit the door behind him. Totally wasting it. Look at that damage. Now here, what I do, I start trying to hit him with my sword hilt because I want to save one black fire bomb for later. Because I was kind of annoyed that I missed one, and I usually do this anyway, so I really don't want to end up wasting two, because I do have a specific plan in mind for these later on, just to speed things up later so I don't have to bother buying a ranged option. And I'm almost dead, so I'm going to try to be really careful here. Now, a simple thing I'm doing here is I'm going to get in just the right range to bait him to do something, let him miss, and then go inside when he's not able to attack me. Very simple, but effective. Yeah, I almost got him. And yeah, there have been people, and I think, yeah, I did it once, I believe, where you can kill him with the hilt, or I think it's actually better to do it with your bare hands. It's not as hard as you'd think, because when you're behind him, there's only 2 or 3 different things he can do, and they're not really that hard to dodge. You just have to be very consistent. So I'm going to heal up here and get the black fire bombs of humanity off my quick use, because I don't want to waste them. Now, target shield. This is actually a pretty good shield. A lot of people would say otherwise, but it's one of the few items in the game that have a better parry window. But you gotta put that in perspective, because if you first hear better parry window, you're probably gonna think, wow, that's probably amazingly good. But once you actually know what the game, how much better it is, it's not what you think. Like, if you're trying to learn how to parry for the first time, I wouldn't even recommend bothering with them. I'm going off memory here, and I roll right back into the barrel. Going off memory, the regular parry window is 5 frames. And if I remember right, the better parry window is 7 frames, so it's not a huge increase. You gotta put it in perspective though, because, we're talking extremely small amounts of time here. 2 extra frames could technically be very helpful. Now, the Thief's starting weapon, the Bandit Knife, is in my opinion probably one of the best starting weapons, because for a lot of the early game encounters, backstabs and parrying is probably your best bet. It's your most high damage tool, and the Bandit Knife has a bonus to critical damage, they call it, backstabs and ripostes. So it's really helpful. And right here you can see me fighting without lock-on. The reason for that is because lock-on gives you more, without locking on you have more freedom of movement, so it's easier to get right outside an enemy's best range, and then just move out of the way easily, and then punish them immediately. It's actually a lot like playing footsies in a fighting game, just in a single player game. It's actually pretty much the same thing. You're just trying to stay right at that range where they'll do an attack, and then immediately move out of the way, then immediately move back in and punish them. Except it's a lot easier in a single player game when you know exactly what the enemy's going to do, but hey, what can you do? It's actually probably one of the more effective ways to beat some of the harder bosses like Smog and Ornstein. It's a lot easier to control their movement when you fight without lock-on. And yeah, for this challenge, I'm not going to be watching cutscenes. If you want to watch the story, I'd recommend just playing the game yourself. Because for a playthrough, the story, like if you're want to experience the story, it's better to play at your own pace, like read item descriptions, talk to NPCs. I don't think that'd make a very good playthrough to watch. It's not really a good game to watch someone else experience the story. It's a different type of story, and I actually prefer it. Now I put points in the dexterity. The way I'll be leveling up this character, I will only be worrying about my damage for a very long time. The reason being is that for the early parts in the game, as long as you're equipping appropriate armor, nothing is really going to damage you too badly for a long time. Most of the enemies in the early game do relatively low amount of damage, even with base vitality of a thief, which is pretty low. Oh, and before I go further in this is pretty much, we know this is Petrus' stash, these items. The reason we know that is because, one, it has a cleric's weaponry, and also it has Lloyd's Talisman and Crack Red Eye Orbs. Those two tools basically are things you use to fight undead. That's pretty much the only purpose of a Lloyd's Talisman. Now, if you've played the game before, you know later on Petrus kills a certain character, a certain undead character, so we can infer this is his stuff, and it also gives us a lot of evidence to know that Petrus and probably the Way of White as a whole aren't exactly the good guys they might appear to be. There's a little bit more going on there, I'd say. That's what I love about this game, all these little details. Oh, but about the armor, getting one-shotted, vitality and all that. I hear a lot of people say how, Dark Souls is cheap because you just get one shot by everything. I don't raise my vitality in this playthrough until, like, on my way to, I think, Smog and Ornstein, which is obviously quite a ways through the game. That's like halfway point in my opinion, maybe a little bit more, and nothing is one-shotted me up till that point, so, and that's with, base vitality, no less. So I really don't understand why so many people say that. It's just obviously not true. And if you equip the appropriate armor as you progress, you can tank a lot of hits even with base vitalities. If you have poise, you can still maintain a decent roll. So I don't know why that's like become a common complaint of the game. Armor is actually more important than I'd say endurance is more important than vitality, really, especially when you consider all the benefits armor gives you in this game. One of my complaints, if I had any about this game, is probably the armor is actually too good, as opposed to Demon Souls where armor was mostly just an aesthetic. Although, if you're really crazy about Demon Souls, there are a few armor pieces that have some use, but I won't get into Demon Souls stuff right now. Yes, as you can see, backstabbing, really powerful. These enemies, I think, they're designed to be easy to backstab, to kind of teach players how it works. Because later on in the game, the more advanced enemies, it's not quite that easy to backstab them. These guys, some of their attacks just scream backstab. They have so much recovery, they're really easy to dodge. And you'll see me fighting without lock-on a lot up ahead. There's advantages and disadvantages to locking on and not locking on. You kind of have to know when to use both. Like, see right here, because I'm not locking on, it makes it very easy to backstab. Like, I don't even have to worry about what he's doing once I dodge his attack. With lock on, the time it would take to get the backstab would be longer, which is more likely that he'll do something to get away from me or turn back around. In here, actually I don't think we get to see it. I think later on, Bandit Knife also does decent bleed build-up for this point in the game, which is also very helpful. A lot of times on playthroughs I'll just run past these guys, but I like to warm up. I haven't played the game in a while. Pick up all the items and stuff. You can't hit that dragon. I always try, but you can't. And over here, I'm going to be getting the wooden shield, which is actually not that bad of a shield, to be honest. Stability's decent for an early game shield. has decent physical block. It does its job. Really, I still kind of play the game as far as shields go in a Demon Souls style where you generally don't use shields on bosses. In this game, you actually can use shields out for bosses more because stability has been kind of given a buff in this game. Highly upgraded shields can get ridiculous stability, but I prefer not to. I feel that you get more damage in when you roll. So here I'm going to try and show off a little shortcut that I think everybody knows, but I get hit by an arrow, then a firebomb, and then I'm dead. Good. That's why I rested at that bonfire, though. I'm not going to go back very far. And the reason I'm using this shortcut is because I'm not going to spend much time in this area. I'm actually going to go straight to the Hydra area to kill him so I can get the washing pole, the weapon I'm going to use for this run. And the thing about this jump, you have to be far to the left. If you're a little too far to the right, you'll hit that wall and die. And parry and riposte. And while I'm doing that, I'm equipping the ring, but you can't equip anything while you're in the middle of an animation, so that's why that menu was open a little bit longer than I'd want it to be. And then chain backstab. Black Knights are actually some of the easier enemies to chain backstab in the game. They always get up in a very slow and predictable manner. Some enemies, as probably the next one I'm going to fight, will show that it's not quite as easy, and I actually did get a Black Knight sword from him, which is actually fairly rare if you have no humanity and no gold Serpentis ring. And up here I'm going to show that you can jump over this burning barrel, I think it is, with the right timing. Yep. I actually wouldn't recommend that. There's a much easier way you can get by there, and there you can see the bleed effect. If you are halfway up that staircase, there's actually a part of the railing that's destroyed. You can just stand there, and it'll move right by you and miss. This guy stabs me right in the back. Right now to fight Havel. The reason I want to kill him is because he gives you one of the best early game rings in the game, and it's actually one of the better rings in general. Havel's ring gives you a ton of an extra equip load, which basically lets you wear better armor, which lets you get poise and more survivability at the cost of almost nothing. Because really, at this point in the game, what other ring are you even going to wear? I mean, you don't even have any other rings. So, well, how do you kill him? Well, backstabbing, of course. The thing with Havel, though, is he's not that easy to chain backstab compared to other enemies. Unlike other enemies, you saw it right there if you look. Unlike other enemies who always get up and turn 180 degrees as they do, sometimes he'll just get up and not turn at all, which requires you to immediately backstab. And if you're not ready for it, it can catch you off guard. The good thing about this is, though, that he's probably got some of the easiest attacks in the game to dodge, so it's not that big a deal if you screw up your chain, like right there. As long as you don't commit to an attack with a lot of recovery, you'll be fine. You just have to be you just got to be patient because he will one-shot you if he hits you right now. Like, it's pretty much guaranteed. I think the only way you won't die is if you get hit by like an AoE effect of his attack, of his Dragon Tooth. But that's not likely to happen. If you get hit, you're pretty much dead. And the reason I'm locking on a lot is because when you lock on, the one benefit of it, it's usually easier to roll dodge an attack, because it's easier to guarantee you move in the direction you want to, because your movement is based on your opponent's position. When you're not locked on, sometimes things can get a little weird when you're moving at an awkward angle based on where the camera is, if you're trying to make a very precise movement. When you're locked on, it's usually pretty guaranteed. You know exactly where you're going to roll. And yes, you can parry him, it's just really not worth the risk. And the extra damage from it isn't even that significant. The reason I'm backing off here is because he's near the corner and I don't want to try to backstab him when his back's towards a wall. And he doesn't want to die. There's some lore on him too. In his stash we find an occult weapon, which is an item used for fighting the gods. And if you know anything about Havel, you know he was one of Gwyn's trusted followers. So it kind of raises some interesting questions why he would be hunting the gods. Oh, and I got Havel's ring. Now I just need, where can I get an armor set to take advantage of it? Well, the Hydra guards knight armor, which is pretty good, so I guess we'll take that since we're right here. Now, the interesting thing here is, though, you'll see I switched to the Morning Star, mostly because it's the only thing that would be helpful here. Like, Bandit Knife just isn't going to do anything to these golems, but the Morning Star does have some interesting effects. It does a ton of poise damage. You'll see I'll hit this Crystal Golem 3 times and it staggers him. These guys aren't exactly easy to stagger to begin with, and since I'm, a base level character pretty much, and I can barely even use this thing, that's pretty impressive. A lot of blunt weapons like that do good poise damage. And right here it's, not looking good. I can't really fight multiple ones of these when I have to hit them like 12 or more times to kill them. So my plan is to get the Hydra to kill them for me. All of the Hydra's attacks hurt nearby enemies as well. And this is actually the area, well, more about, it's actually, I'd say it's where the Hydra really is. It's actually where Calamite is fought in the DLC, which is pretty cool. It's just that lake doesn't, that canyon, that like pit doesn't exist yet. And right here I'm wondering why the heck isn't he attacking me, the Hydra? So I kind of have to be a little bit more risky and run around like an idiot. Normally I actually wouldn't do this until I have a more powerful weapon, but I really want to get the washing pole before I do anything else. But for the most part, this ends up going well. And of course, all of the Hydra's attacks get caught in the trees. Like right here, you can see I'm using not locking on and baiting them to attack, just so it's easier for me to keep them away from me when I run past. If like I was locked on, it would be a lot harder to manipulate it to that level. So I equip my Black Firebound for later, for the Hydra. But I really need to get these guys out of the way before I get up to him. When you're in the water, it's not quite as easy to just juking around. And I get hit, but it's okay. And you can see while I'm running, I'm holding up my shield. The reason for that is, because of how the jumping mechanic works in this game, if you run and then quickly hit circle to, well, if you're playing Xbox it's different, but if you're running and you hit a button to roll while running, there's a good chance you'll jump, which is probably not what you want to do. If you're running while your shield's up, you can't actually jump. So that way you can run and quickly hit run again to roll while running, without having to worry about jumping accidentally. It's very helpful. I do that a lot in this playthrough. Now, it's not an exact, like, you can't just do it on the fly. Like, if you're running and you put up your shield and immediately hit roll, you'll probably jump. You have to have your shield up to begin with, and for at least a half a second before you try to roll. There was actually a long time when I didn't know that, and it was really annoying, because I'd have to, like, purposely hesitate while running to make sure I roll instead of jump, which is totally against how I would play in Demon Souls, but thankfully I know about this now, and I don't have to worry about that. In fact, when I think about Dark Souls 2, that's actually one of the things I'm wondering about, if they're going to try and change how the running and jumping works, because it really is kind of a problem in this game, how running and rolling and jumping and running are all on the same button. I really think they should find a better way to do it. I'm not exactly sure how. I'm pretty sure they want to keep jumping in, but I'm not sure what other button you could assign it to without it causing other problems. And I get destroyed there. Waste an Estus. Now, as you can see here, the dangerous part about the Hydra here is that some of those snakeheads can actually dead angle you while you try to block these early ones that are sweeping around like that, which can be a serious problem. And I'm putting the knight armor on just in case that happens. And I have no idea where he came from. I really don't. He just shows up. I have no idea how. I didn't see him up to this point. And he's dead. And now, if someone's wondering what the heck is dead angling, well, dead angle attacks is basically an attack where it actually comes at you at an angle that gets around your shield. It's kind of akin to a cross-up in a fighting game, if I had to make a comparison. In Demon Souls, there actually were, it was mostly only a thing PvP players talked about, and yeah, I'm speeding this up because it takes like 30 minutes. This is like times 16 speed. But in Demon Souls, dead angle attacks were basically only things PvP players talked about. But in Dark Souls, there's actually enemies, that purposely have dead angle attacks. The tutorial boss actually has one. He has this really slow but high up vertical downward attack. If you try to block it, a lot of times you won't because it'll hit the top of your head before it hits your shield. It's kind of cool that they put like an emergent property from Demon Souls in this game as like a more actual, standard, tried and true mechanic. I went down to times 2 for this, because these two heads are specifically ones that are probably the most trouble. This one on the right a lot of times likes to go into this wall where you can't hit him. Now the trick to that is trying to figure out how to get the Hydra to move. He can actually move around just like any other enemy. It's just this version of the Hydra doesn't do it too much. We can see how I'm trying to get him to rotate to look at me when I'm far to the left here. It's pretty much how you deal with this one. It's really annoying, but sometimes it doesn't even work. If I had a ranged attack, I could probably just deal with it that way, but this is where Black Firebombs come in handy. The reason I'm using that is because he is very hard to melee without falling into the pit below. So that'll be the end of part 1.